What's going on, guys? It is Sir Grayson here today, and we're here with a Pokemon discussion video. And in this video, we're going to be discussing which gen should get a remake. Now, yesterday I made a video discussing the likelihood of Gen 1 getting a remake in Gen 8. Based on the context clues given in Gen 7, I still think a Gen 1 remake is what we will most likely wind up with. But after talking with somebody named Inferno Natsu, who commented on yesterday's video, I thought it would be kind of a fun video topic if we discussed which gen should be remade, not which one will most likely get the remake. So, how we're going to do this is we're going to lay out all 7 gens on the table and discuss why each particular gen deserves or needs a remake, and see which ones have the biggest need. I think the easiest way to do this is to get the most obvious stuff out of the way first, and in my opinion, that's obviously Gen 7, 6, and 3. None of these gens really need a remake because, well, they're all current. Gen 7 is the most recent gen. Gen 6 is the one is also not that far out and is still a very hot property. Gen 3 just had a remake in Gen 6. And I think it's pretty obvious that none of these 3 really qualify for a remake as of right now or any time in the near future. So now that we have the obvious part out of the way, that really just leaves us with Gens 1, 2, 4, and 5. And I think you can make a decent case for each of these 4 gens to get a remake, but which one deserves it the most, as I said, that's what we're going to be looking at today. We're going to take a look at each gen, and based on its own merits, decide which one kind of needs the remake the most. Now, starting numerically, we have Gen 1. Everyone's nostalgia baby, the biggest, most iconic gen in the franchise, the one that started it all, and most casual players' favorite gen due to its Pokemon, and the love that they have for having grown up with this gen. Now, the best argument you can make for why Gen 1 deserves a remake is because it technically is the most outdated game in the franchise, with its most recent incarnation being on the Game Boy Advance, and subject to all of the things that came prior to Gen 4. No typing splits, no online versus play, and being the only game that isn't available on a DS-style console as anything other than a port. But there are also a handful of things working against Gen 1 as well in terms of whether or not it deserves a remake. First, and most denoted by people who don't want a Gen 1 remake, is the fact that it already had one. Yes, it might have been a long time ago, but other people want their favorite gens remade as well. So, is it really fair for it to get a second remake before the like of Gen 4 even gets one? Another less pointed out thing is that I still think is worth noting is the fact that a lot of people overlook that we've played through Kanto 4 times, and that's pretty crazy. You're going 4. How is that possible? We've only had Gen 1 and a Gen 1 remake, and 1 plus 1 is 2. How do you get 4 out of that? Well, let's not forget that in the later half of Gen 2, we actually wind up going to and playing through a redux of Kanto. Once again, all of the gym badges catching the Snorlax, a run-in with Team Rocket, even if it is just one guy who has the misfortune of not speaking English very well, and battling good old Blue. You play through Kanto in Gen 2, albeit with some changes, but that still doesn't change the region itself. Routes, maps, areas haven't changed much, well, but besides Cinnabar, Rip Blaine's gym. On a side note, it was pretty badass. Island gets destroyed, sets up Jim in a cave, and that's job dedication right there. But that's still only 3. What about a 4th one? Well, if you recall, Gen 2 got its own remake in Generation 4, which, as you can guess, included a new and improved Kanto trip. So, in a weird way, we actually played through Kanto 4 times in a row. And while, yes, the Gen 2 variations aren't the real McCoy of starting out in Pallet Town and taking a Charmander, Squirtle, or in my case, Bulbasaur, and using it to become a champion, we technically did play through the region 4 times. And for me, this is a few times too many. I think Kanto does clearly need an update, but maybe somebody else needs it more first. And that is the perfect segue into Gen 2, my personal favorite gen. And when it comes to Pokemon, what's not to love? You get to play through both of the most nostalgic regions for a lot of people, Johto and Kanto. You also get to see the 150 OG Mons that everyone loves, as well as some really cool additions such as Umbreon, Espeon, Hitmontop, Steelix, Tyranitar, and so many more. Plus, the battle with Red on Mount Silver at the end of the game feels pretty rewarding and frankly just kind of badass. But as much as I love Gen 2, does it need or deserve a remake? Well, not really. Unlike Gen 1, Gen 2's remake is more recent, being on the Nintendo DS, meaning that you can play it on the 3DS. Additionally, because it was made in Gen 4, that means it has the typing splits and a far more updated move pool than the Gen 3 remakes in Gen 1. And as kind of a personal side note, I feel like it would be kind of awkward to go from a Gen 2 remake to a Gen 3 remake and then go straight back to Gen 2. Like, why did you remake it the first time then? Especially when there's at least a few other gens out there who need it a lot more. So, sorry Gen 2, but as much as I love you, I don't think you need updating quite yet. Now, since we already covered Gen 3, that means we can skip right into Gen 4, and 1 seem to be the Gen 4, and Gens 1 and 4 seem to be the most popular ones that people feel like they need a remake. A lot of people in Gen 4 feeling that Gens 1 through 3 got a remake. Now it's Gen 4's turn, and a lot of Gen 1 fans feeling like the remake they got isn't fair because of how outdated it is. And this is a fairly valid point for Gen 4 people to make. Why shouldn't they get a remake? Well, as said before, Gen 1 is the most outdated gen, but it's also the one that people have played through the most, and maybe now it's somebody else's turn. Gen 4 had the second lowest sales of any gen of Pokemon, excluding the remakes, and Gen 7, since Gen 7 hasn't fully lived out its lifespan yet. So when I say it had the lowest sales, second lowest sales of any gen, I'm excluding, of course, any kind of remakes in the gen. Gen 7 itself, because it has yet to live out its lifespan, and as well as games like Pokemon Yellow and Emerald, which were not the original releases for that gen. But what better time to take something that obviously has a fan base, but didn't do as well and give it a second shot? Gen 4, in my opinion, wasn't the worst gen when it comes to Pokemon designs. The starters are cool, as well as adding some newer beloved Pokemon to the roster. But not only that, Gen 4 laid the groundwork for the game's current combat system after having introduced the typing splits, which entirely changed how you play against other people. But also updating the move pool to fit those typing splits. Part of the reason Gen 4 sales, in my opinion, were on the decline had to do with a burnout factor. People were tired of the huge phenomenon that was Pokemon. Additionally, the original fans were now angsty teenagers who had other things to do and worry about besides whether they could fit God into a tiny hand-sized ball. And by God, I of course mean Arceus. But now these people are adults looking to relive and realize childhood glory. But why not try and give them something new? New for them anyway, as well as appeasing to the OG Gen 4 fan base. On top of that, it's a great opportunity to fix anything people didn't like the first time. Hand-holding, how annoying Barry was, maybe how dramatic Team Plasma was, etc. In my opinion, this is now the perfect time to give Gen 4 a shot, even if it isn't really very likely that Nintendo and Game Freak actually wind up doing it due to the fact of the almighty dollar and the ravenous Gen 1 fanbase. Now, we can move on to the last gen worth discussing in this video, that being Gen 5, the worst selling and least liked gen in the Pokemon franchise. I am aware that Gen 5 does have its fans, so no offense intended, but a large portion of people's reaction to Gen 5 was, what? Generator but legendaries Garbodor and Vanillux have been memed to death at this point. The fact that the game tries to make you feel bad for catching Pokemon, since the villains basically point out that it's virtual cockfighting, and it wasn't a lot of people's favorite. On top of that, like Gen 2, a random Gen 5 remake might feel kind of out of place. Why not just do Gen 4 first? Especially since Gen 5 has more updated modeling for Pokemon and battling, And not only that, we kind of already had a second version of Gen 5 in black and white too, so do we really need it again just 2 gens later? I think we could safely say Gen 5 can be waited on, for now at least. But anyway, these are just some of my own thoughts on remaking various gens of Pokemon and why each gen does and doesn't deserve its own remake. But what do you think? Let me know how you guys feel down in the comment section below. What's your favorite gen? And why do you think it should be remade versus any of the others? And remember, if you enjoyed the video, to like and subscribe for more content like this in the future. I hope to see you guys then.